Everybody finishes up. Everybody knows Horace Somes. He's retired from the New Jersey Forest Fire Service. He was the Division D fire warden, which basically meant he was charged of all central New Jersey, down to what, Georgia? Or Lake Park? Wherever. All right, anyway. Besides many things he's done, he knows a lot of things about a lot of different things. He's also a farmer. He lives in the suburbs of downtown, from downtown Wading River, off of Turtle Creek Road. So if you need a Christmas tree, he's the man. We're going to talk about salt hay today. If you go back in the history of South Jersey, it's one of the most important things that was produced here for many generations. So, Horace?
Okay, thank you. We're going to go quick because I don't know where the storm line is. I brought my raincoat, so there's no guarantee that it's not going to rain. But anyway, as Mike introduced, I do a lot of natural history, mostly natural history. I'm not big into genealogy. My background was in botany, so you're going to get the undergraduate course in salt hay tonight, not the graduate course. Last month we had a thing where they talked about water, drinking water, canteens, casks during these battles. The thing that I like to bring in, if you're driving down across the Parkway Bridge or going out onto one of the barrier bars, you see all of that greenery down there in the tide marsh. That's salt hay. This is salt hay. And might be a dead green head in it because I killed a few when I was cutting them today. But it was interesting because you all came here tonight, I guess, in cars, motorcycles, or whatever, and you stopped at a gas station to get gas, diesel, whatever, to get here. Going back a couple hundred years, you had horses, right? You didn't have Tractor Supply. You might have a farm where you had the luxury of enough ground to raise some hay, to feed them, or to graze them. But here along the coast, anywhere along the islands and up the main streams, and there's a natural growth called salt hay. Spartina patens, I'll hit you with that one. Spartina being cordgrass, the generic name, because Native Americans take this and braid it and make it into baskets and all. So it was a cord type grass. Now, go ahead, that's kind of what it looks like. There's some taller stuff there, but basically if you're going, particularly across the Parkway Bridge, that's a good one. You see all that greenery? That's all that stuff, and it grows more than green heads, okay? And it has a very small floral structure. Now these are young. They haven't grown too much this year, so they'll probably be like this by the end of the summer, and then they'll have some very small grass-type seeds on them. Okay. In the winter, it'll all be brown. It won't be that bright green that you see right now. It'll be brown. Okay. It's kind of interesting because it's a tide marsh plant, but it doesn't grow everywhere because tides change. Anybody that lives along the shore know some areas flood new moon, full moon, some not, and it grows in between that area of the area that doesn't have tides and the ones that flood all the time. Okay. And of course there's other types of vegetation out there, very tall stuff, but this is the little stuff. Okay? Now, if you come up further up into the rivers, you're going to get from the salty stuff into the fresh stuff. And you will not find salt hay growing there. You'll find a lot of different interesting things grow in these freshwater areas. We have wild rice that grows here. Not that high, not real big. Over towards Swedesboro, it'll be 10 foot high because it's really freshwater there. So there's a niche, I use that term, where the salt hay will grow in the saltier areas, but then as you get up into the freshwater, it just drops out and other things come in. Okay? And thing is interesting, and this is historical. This is one of the state geologists' atlas sheets. They started making them in the 1880s, stopped in the 1960s. Really a fast set. You can get them online, and you can go and look at them for the whole state. They're nice and easy, 1 inch to a mile, and they show a lot of detail. In this case, you can see on the right, that's the Wading River across the bottom of America. You can see field edges where it's cleared ground, and then you can see forest all around it. So they're neat maps. If you've never looked at one, it's worth looking at. But anyway, if you had a farm, and mine was that big cleared area just about in the center, it's been a farm since, as near as we can tell, the first proprietor's grant was 1750. Probably was taken from Native Americans. It was a 500-acre plantation grant, probably previously occupied by Native Americans, because I found artifacts on the farm. And that's what we did back then. Why come in and clear pine barrens to make a farm when you can take it away from the Native Americans? But the value of it, and this is where you get into geography, is that you can see that big clear area. Well, if you come down along the Malta and the Wading, you can see a different type of patterning. And that's tide marsh. And there is actually a real estate aspect to it. You could buy a little piece of pine on sand, try and grow some crops on it. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. But if you get into some of these better soils where you could grow food for yourself, maybe grow some hay. But basically, you want to use that soil to grow food for you. And then what do you do to feed the animals? If you have proximity to the salt hay areas, where you can take your livestock and pasture them out on the meadows, because they will eat this. Okay? And it could be where you cut the hay, bring it in the winter, so that you have food all winter, or you could actually pasture the livestock out on the land or out on the marsh. Okay? And again, if you're out there, anybody has been on marshes, you know they're mud. There's 20 feet of mud in most of those marshes. And it can be thick, it can be thin, whatever. So to take animals out on there, you just have to give them some kind of, I'll use the term snowshoes. The one on the right is where they double the traditional horseshoe. Yeah, stay with me on this one. To give it more bearing, so that if your animal's out there, that it wouldn't sink in. Right? And on the left, a little more fancy. That was like a horseshoe of all iron. On the right, that's actually from the Tucker Seaport, where they had this shoe so it could go on the hoof of the animal, but they had a piece of wood. Again, to increase the bearing so that they can walk across and not get stuck. It's not to say they don't walk into a creek somewhere, but basically if they're up on the high ground, and we'll come up on why that's important, that they could travel, the animals could travel, because the horse's hoof has a lot of weight, a lot of bearing, and you can push them into the mud. And salt hay is a big deal. This happens to be Salt Hay Creek on the Wading River. And there are many areas in which salt hay was a dominant cover. And I'll go back to the parkway. When you look at it out there, at that greenery, it's mostly salt hay. So what's the deal, other than the greenheads and the mosquitoes? As bad as the mosquitoes and the greenheads are, the campers that come down and are across the street from me have it worse, because they're not used to dealing with it. And we don't swat them, we just roll it down, right? You know, if you have a lot of them, we'll just roll them down, measure. Okay. This is a enhanced picture. The Mullaher across the bottom, the wading up on the side. This is from 1930s with some of the imagery that you can look at online. You can see those little darker areas that have been highlighted. Those are all areas that they were harvesting salt hay in for different purposes. And in this case, when they go through and cut the salt hay down, they expose the mud underneath. So you get this patterning. And it was a really big industry here in the past.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
What did they use it for?
We're getting there. The value of these marshes, they divide them up. So if you wanted 25 acres to have for hay, for whatever purpose, we're going to get to that, you could do it, you could rent it, you could lease it. This happens to be the Swan Bay Meadows. It's now the Swan Bay Wildlife Management Area. It was all blocked up in the mid-1800s for sales or for lease. Okay. And they would put in ditches so that they could get small boats up in there to collect this material. They did a lot of digging before they started digging for mosquito ditches. Okay. And here's some of the enhanced things where they did a lot of manipulation of the marsh so they could get out there and get at the hay, get it on a wagon, get it on a boat, get it back to somewhere that you could sell it. And the interesting thing is, everything had a name. Because back then, it was important to know, where am I going? Oh, I'm going to go down to Old Ditch and hunt or trap or fish. All of these little streams had names, and they were important location points that don't show on the modern maps, but were very important to the people who were working the land, the water, the marshes, so that you could identify where you were. Okay? And, okay, this is actually an interesting thing. New Jersey Bill is a insert from 1955 showing a salt hay operation at Lower Bank on the Mullica. And I'll show you in a minute what they do with the salt hay. But they would have wagons that would go out on the meadows to collect it. And this individual here had a barge that he would then move the salt hay onto, take it to a better landing, and sell it. This is up in Barnegat, and up there you get a lot of meadows, just big, wide green areas. And back in the day, it was a major thing. Big piles of salt hay that had been harvested. You can't see it in here, but I think I have a better shot. They also had a compression type thing where they could take the hay and mash it down into bales, make it easier to handle. And this is showing the same thing. On the left is Barnegat in 1930, with areas that have been cleared off of the vegetation. Now, of course, a lot of it's lagoon development, and there's no longer the demand for salt hay that used to be, because everybody has cars and use gas and all. They weren't dependent upon hay for feeding their livestock. Right? And a lot of it was converted over into other uses until the environmental laws came into existence and said, it's just not about what people can use it for, it's the value to the estuary, to all of the animals that live out there. It's not just a grass that grows and can be harvested, but it also can be part of the ecosystem that supports everything. Okay? And how do you get out there? There's a thing called a corduroy road, because you just can't take a wagon out on the meadows. Okay? Here you go. Okay. Basically, what you could do to create bearing for your wagons to get out there was to take cedar posts, slabs from sawmills, lie them down side by side by side by side. It's called a corduroy. There was a way to cross wetland areas, and some of these corduroy roads they were a couple miles long to get out across the meadows with the wagons. Okay. And this is the end of Turtle Creek Road where I live, and a lot of detail was going on here because Turtle Creek Road came down, went across the bridge, and then went another mile across Corduroy to the Mullica River so that they could, for two reasons. One, to get salt hay up. Number two, to go out to fisheries that were on the Mullica. Okay? And the bridges that they had were pretty substantial. so that you could go out and collect your salt hay, bring it back, and sell it at market or wherever you could do it. Most of the bridges are now gone, they're no longer needed, but it was part of the historic culture out there in terms of how they worked with the land. Okay? And I'm going through this pretty quick because I did want to get through before the storms arrive. And you can see underneath here on the right, that's the corduroy laid underneath the old meadows. And the bridge is now long gone, but that material is still down under the marsh. And I'm not going to go out there with a wagon or a car now, but it's buried in there. It'd be interesting to do some dendrochronology and see when this stuff was cut, because it's all buried underneath there. Okay? And how did you put them in the ground? Used them all. When I was a younger person, that was a maul that was used for driving things into the marsh to make bridges, to make fences. And the handle, it's interesting, the handle's about the fourth or fifth handle because we kept breaking it. I wasn't the first one to break it. But that big round thing, that's a gum tree section. Anybody that knows wood knows that gum does not split. So that gum section has hammered many a piling down into the marsh for bridges, for walkways, for whatever. And I don't do that anymore. Okay. And how did you cut it? Well, the hard way was this way. A sickle with the side, cutting it by hand. And some of the old accounts of business in the area relate to how much they would pay someone to cut hay for a day, or rake it into piles, or carry it off. Okay? But then along came the Industrial Revolution with machines for farming. And some of those would be used for cutting salt hay out on the marsh. If you've laid corduroy out there and your horse has those big shoes that he can walk out across there. Okay? And it's a sickle bore mower. Anybody knows what a sickle bore is? It goes like this, up and down. It's got cutting teeth on it. And lay down, it can cut the hay off. The one on the right, that's actually my grandfather's old mowing machine that's kind of preserving it. Okay? And you could work out there in places on the meadows with care. It could be raked up, put in piles, okay? Hand raking is one way to do it. Pitchforking, putting it on a pile. Just don't leave it out there. It'll blow around and float away, okay? And they had different types of rakes, and that's a replica pitchfork. It was made for taking this cut hay, piling it up so that you can get it out of there. That's our barn. That was actually, you see the big double doors? That was a hay barn. You could drive a wagon right through it. And then the loft would be where you'd pitch with a fork your hay so that you'd have food throughout the winter for your animals. And to get it there, first off, get it in a pile. Once you cut it, you just don't leave it there and let it float away with the next high tide or blow away with the next gale. They would put it into piles, let it dry, then put it generally onto a horse-drawn wagon, or maybe later on a tractor-drawn wagon. They could go out on these corduroy roads to collect the materials, because you're going to do something with it. Okay? And that's just another shot of some of the activity of handling the hay. Okay? And it was very interesting. At one time, it was a major source of income along some of these rivers for people to cut, haul, and then sell the hay. And the shot on the left is from Whitegat. They actually used oxen in place. And I didn't understand that because I thought everybody had horses or calves. Oxen, my wife who was big into livestock said the oxen, which had a bigger hoof and shorter leg, were less prone to the force to breaking it when they're on unstable ground. They didn't use them a lot because they're pretty much single-use hauling type animals. Horses, you can ride it to church or the meeting house or whatever, cows you can get milk from. The oxen were more single purpose, like a tractor on a tractor trailer. They were the haulers, but again, they were a little more resilient, particularly to working in uneven ground, okay? And the one on the left's interesting. That's a empty wagon coming back from selling salt hay in Cape or in Gullica Hill to Lower Bank, because people had demand for hay elsewhere, and they would haul it. They'd have tractor trailers, and of course you have your mosquito parade that goes with it. Okay. Now, getting to it, sometimes it's tough on these small creeks and canals. They had these things called row gorbies, which are kind of like a flat-bottomed boat for rowing. You could go through these creeks to where the hay had been piled up, load it off onto them, and then take it to a landing or somewhere else where they could be put onto a larger device. And there's always navigation hazards as you're working around here. I'm fascinated by this because at high tide you can see all this water. At low tide, this is right below the Wading River Bridge. And the one thing that I pointed out on the left, about left of center, you'll see a stump. And you'll see a prop off right here. Something like a magnet. But the thing that goes under them is buried in the bottom are all of these old 1,000, 2,000-year-old stumps, which create that navigation hazard. But that's before the marshes came up and expanded. That's what grew there. They're cedar, and then as sea level rose, they were killed back in the marshes formed over. Okay? And Charles Weber from Lower Bank, he was one of the last of the haymen on the Mullica. And it was all about getting your crop to market. This is the 542 bridge at Bridgeport, which is now Wading River. And when they put that first bridge in, they were pretty smart. First off, they didn't build it of concrete and steel. They used wood, which was less prone to decomposition in the marine environment. And the first bridge they put in a low deck so that you could unload the boats right onto the bridge. So it became Bridgeport for a while as to where the hay ended up, and then you could take it from there to wherever you're going to go. Now my program goes on a bit more, but I've covered things, I hope not too quick a hurry, but to give you an idea that this minuscule little plant was part of our cultural history here and very important to the economy from the colonial times on, because it was hay that could be harvested. You didn't have tractor supply. You'd take your hay wagon, mound it up huge, take it to your barn, throw it up in the loft, and then you had food for your animals all winter. I proceeded quickly because I know the hour's late, but I hope you are interested by it. If you are older age, smoke them if you got them. I never smoked this. We used to smoke. How many people have smoked cattails? There you go. And in the summer, you take cut the cattails. You can come back next month. You put the cattails up on the chicken coop roof, have them dry out, and then this time of year when you get a lot of bugs, as a little kid, you could be there with your stogie and smoking down. But anyway, that was my quick, down and dirty undergraduate thing on salt hay. I hope you found it interesting. Afterwards, if you have any questions, don't keep me too late.
Just one.
You had a question.
Was there salt hay industry also in Cumberland County down all the way?
Yes. Yeah, anywhere you had those meadows that were suitable for this particular plant to grow. And again, if you got into the freshwater areas like up around Swedesboro, totally different. It's all fresh. were a brackish, marsh and expansive, that, all along the Delaware down to Cape May and, right on around.
Mr. Sones, how about on the barrier islands? I know that-
Not on the barrier islands, but behind it where there's meadows.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be there. It's all about location, location.
To take their livestock over to forage on the islands.
Well, some of that was done because actually there were some permanent farms over on the islands. Going back to Tucker's Island and all, there was farmland there. And they would forage wherever they could. But again, you just couldn't go anywhere and say, hey, let your cow loose. It's going to end up in that creek and you're going to have a lot of fun with it. But I hope you enjoyed it. It was a crash course.
Jamie has a question.
I wanted to point out one thing, sir. Down in Cape May County, I found, researching for my book on the Revolution, before and during and after the American Revolution, Cape May County courts, every year they set the tavern fare rates, how much they can charge for a man, for a room, how much for stabling a horse. And I was surprised to see that stabling a horse with salt hay was more money than stabling a horse with flea hay.
Because with it, salt hay is more resistant to rot in the winter, or if you just pile it. Actually, it's better in the garden because it lays flat. It does not have weed seeds in it, and that was a demand that was used. The other weirdness was when they first started coming out with concrete roads, get a concrete set, there was a demand for it to blanket on top of the roadway so they could set up. So it's an interesting thing.
DEP doesn't allow that anymore, correct? I remember 80s and 90s, they still see salt hay on the Delaware, West Creek Dock Road, and
And the
Barnegat.
demand is not there. You don't go out and cut salt hay.
Agway used to stock it when Agway was still around. They used to
Yeah.
stock salt hay.
Hurricane Sandy pretty much ended.
But anyway, thanks for the
Thanks,
opportunity. And,
All right, remember,